In today's lesson, we are going to be multiplying a binomial by a trinomial, and then also cubing a binomial. So we'll go ahead and learn a method to solve these problems. And so we'll take a look at the first one here. And here we have a binomial, and here's their trinomial. And the way I'm going to do it is basically using the distributive property. And that's what we do when we use FOIL. And actually on part 2 of this lesson, we'll practice FOIL again. But the FOIL method basically works where you're taking the first term and you're multiplying it by the first term of the other binomial and the last term of the other binomial. We call those our first and outer terms. Well, here, we're doing the same sort of thing, but we're going to take this x right here, and we're going to multiply it by each of these terms. And so I'm going to do that first. So I'm just multiplying the x by all those numbers, and here's what I get. I get an x to the third power. Remember, I'm changing x times x squared. I've got 3 x's being multiplied. The next one, x times negative 3x. Well, that makes a negative 3x squared. So again, I did x times the negative 3x. Now I'm doing x times 5. Well, that just makes a 5x. So that's my first step. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the 2, and I'm going to multiply it by each of these terms in that trinomial. And so I'll do the same thing. Now when I do this though, 2 times x squared makes 2x squared. I'm not going to put it underneath the x to the third. I'm going to put it underneath the x to the second. So I'm going to put it right here, so that way I can collect those two terms. So now 2 times negative 3x makes a negative 6x. 2 times positive 5, well, that number is going to go off to the side over here because there's no number to collect it with. And what this does for us is it puts it in descending order right away. And all of my terms are lined up, so I'm ready to add. Otherwise, the method would be just to do the same thing, but place these numbers alongside the ones in blue. And I think you'll make more or less errors if you line the numbers up, because you'll see directly what they are rather than having to look from one side to the other. Well, here we're left with an x to the third, and here we have to subtract, so we're opposite signs. So I end up with a negative x squared, a negative x, 5 minus 6 makes negative 1, and then bring down that plus 10. And there is the answer. Well, here's another one to practice. Same sort of thing. This time we just have a 5x minus 1, so 5x times by each of the numbers in that trinomial. So it's the same sort of thing. 5x times negative 2x squared makes a negative 10x to the third power. So 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. X times x squared, we saw in the last problem, that's x to the third. Well, it's a 5x times 4x. That makes a positive 20x squared. So 5 times 4 makes 20. X times x makes x squared. Moving on to the last one, 5x times negative 3. Negative 15x is what we get. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. And just bring that x down. Well, now we move on to the last number in the binomial. It's the negative 1. Well, the nice thing about multiplying by a 1 is the numbers won't change, but the signs do because it's negative. So, negative 1 times negative 2x squared makes a positive 2x squared. Now notice I'm putting it underneath the term I'm going to collect it with. Negative 1 times 4x makes a negative 4x. Negative 1 times negative 3 makes a positive 3. Well, from that point, we're ready to add those numbers up. So when I add this together, I'm left with a negative 10x to the third, a positive 22x squared, a negative 19x, and a positive 3. So there is our answer. Well, in the next problem, it looks a little bit different because we have the binomial on the right-hand side, but it's pretty much done the same way. You're just going to take this 2x to the third and multiply it over every number in that trinomial. So I'm going to start with the highest exponents first. 2 times 4 makes 8. X to the third makes x to the sixth power, adding up those exponents. 2 times negative 1 makes a negative 2. X squared and x to the third makes x to the fifth. 7 times 2 makes 7, or 14, sorry, 14. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap in case there's an x to the third and an x to the fourth power, but it doesn't look like there will be in this case. But if there was, I would leave a little bit of a gap here. So 14x to the third. Whenever there's a missing exponent, it's nice to leave a gap in case you end up with that later on. And so now we're done multiplying the 2x to the third by each of the numbers. Let's move on to the negative 3. So it's negative 3 times each of these terms. And start with the highest exponents first and put those so it's in descending order. Negative 3 times 4 makes a negative 12x to the third power. So it's going to go underneath this x to the third. Negative 3 times negative 1 makes a positive 3, and it's an x squared. Negative 3 times 7 makes negative 21. And then from there we can add it all up. Now notice there's only one term to combine. The nice thing about this method is it puts it in descending order. The terms are lined up that you're going to combine, and then you're done once you add it up. So 8x to the 6th minus 2x to the 5th, and then a plus 2x to the 3rd plus 3x squared minus 21. Long answer, but there it is. Well, the last problem is similar to one of the problems. It's not going to be in the form of an area or a volume problem, but I wanted to show you what we could have as a possible problem in this problem. And when I'm dealing with volume, you take the length of the side, and we'll say this is a cube. We take the length of the side, x minus 2, and we cube it. We multiply it 3 times together. So what this means, when you see this, and you'll see this on, I think it's number 58, what you're going to want to do is multiply 2 of the binomials together. And then once you get that answer, then multiply by that last binomial. So when you're doing this, remember you're doing those first, outer, inner, last. So x times x makes x squared. X times negative 2 makes a negative 2x. Then you move on to this one. Negative 2 times x makes a negative 2x again. Negative 2 times negative 2 makes a positive 4. So you can collect two like terms here. We're left with an x squared minus 4x plus 4. But we're not done. We need to take that trinomial and multiply it by this binomial that I just brought down. And so now it becomes a problem just like we had been solving. So we take the x and multiply it by each of the numbers inside that trinomial. So we're left with an x to the third, that's the x squared times x, then a negative 4x squared, that's the negative 4x times x, and then a positive 4x. Well, once we've done that, we move on to the negative 2. We multiply negative 2 by each of those numbers. And let's take a look at the negative 2 times x squared. That makes a negative 2x squared. Negative 2 times negative 4x makes a positive 8x. Negative 2 times 4 makes a negative 8. So once you have that, you're going to add these terms together, and we'll have our answer. X to the third minus 6x squared, positive 12x, and a minus 8. Those are the answers. Well, that's part 1, and those are the first 3 problems that you'll see on tonight's homework. The rest of the homework is a review of using the FOIL method by multiplying binomials.